Big weekend for football, all kinds of football. Penn State recruiting takes it to a new level on Saturday. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, probably even before then, because there's some important stuff going on this weekend. That's why we're the important people here on the show. Sean Fitz, publisher of Blue White Illustrated, he's back as always. Ryan Snyder, recruiting insider for Blue White Illustrated, talking about the players and the names you need to know this weekend that are going to be visiting Penn State. Ryan, I want to start with you. You've been working very hard on the list. You've been working very hard on confirming who's going to be there this weekend. You can check out all his stuff at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Sign up right now. Great time to mention that. But Ryan, just generally the list that you have been working on, give us the feeling you have about it going into this weekend in terms of all the things we normally ask about.
Yeah, great list for a noon start, Sean. I think you'd agree with that. Maybe probably a little bit better than I would have thought 2 weeks ago, just because of high school playoffs, all that sort of stuff. Right now we're at 81 confirmations. I've got, let's see here. I think where did I put my notes? Yeah, they are. 15 four-star players for 2025 class. Pretty good, right? Whether it's on-3s four-star or on-3 industry, I just kind of combine those two. So 15 four-star players, out of the 2025 uncommitted guys. Of course, there's more when you add in the commits. The 2026 is interesting to me. It's a little smaller than I thought it would be. Usually, at least recently, we've been seeing quite a few 2026 guys. It's there's a handful. What is it? I don't know, 6, 7 guys who have an offer, that are coming up. And then, of course, there's a bunch of guys who don't hold an offer yet, but with them only being sophomores, will likely get some down the road. But like I said, 81 confirmations. I see us getting a few more, maybe closer to 90 or so. I don't know if we'll get to 100, but, talk to me on Saturday morning and it'll be 110.
Fitz, how are you looking at this weekend in terms of importance, impact? The game is obviously the centerpiece, but there's a lot of stuff going on around it that Penn State can make some headway with what Ryan was just talking about, right?
Yeah, I agree with Ryan. It's a good list, and it's a situation where I think you probably see Michigan, you see the big game, and you expect something similar to the whiteout, which it's tough this time of year. You got high school playoffs, which have, put a big dent into it. St. Joe's Prep plays on Saturday, Imhotep plays on Saturday. A lot of these schools where Penn State often hosts some of their marquee visitors are in action on Saturday, so that hurts. The noon kick, James Frank was asked about that last night, and it's not ideal. It's not ideal to have kids show up at 8 a.m., 9 a.m. and try and balance getting your team ready with getting the one-on-one time that they need. Apologies for my voice, by the way. I picked up a cold this week, so that's why I sound so sultry. But no, I think it's a very good list, and it continues to grow. Ryan and I have some feelers out for some guys that we think are going to be there that could really amplify the presence of this list once again. But all in all, the way it looks right now, the way that Ryan has just crushed it this week, it's a pretty good list.
And T-Frank, real quick to add, I was comparing it to last year's Ohio State list, and last year it ended up being about 60 or so, true Division I prospects. There's a handful of guys in here who end up being walk-ons or so. But when I do compare it to what that Ohio State, big and kickoff was last year, it is bigger than last year. So kudos to the staff. They've clearly been working on this for a couple of weeks now.
That's a good segue to remind you, if you want to sign up, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com to get that information from Fitz and from Ryan as the week goes on. Saturday morning when things are going on. Subscribe right now. We have a big game sale. There is a massive game coming, as you know. The internet is on fire, and we're here to satiate that. 50% off for new subscribers over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You can sign up using the promo code. And when you do that, you get a yearly subscription for just over $50. It had to be $50 and change, so I couldn't actually say exactly $50. But the point is, you get all kinds of information on recruiting, analysis, reporting, behind the scenes, administration stuff, all the things that Blue White Illustrated brings you, the most complete and comprehensive coverage of Penn State football all year round for just over $50. Subscribe right now and get all that great stuff.
Don't forget basketball. We don't need to hear that from Nate again.
Yes, very good point. Basketball has started. I have to remember to bring that back into my promo. The basketball has started. You get the insights into what's going on with building an entirely new program for the Nittany Lions on that side as well. Also today, bird dogs. You want to get your bird dogs. I was just talking to somebody on the board, Fitz, and somebody asked me, what's the value of a built-in liner in shorts? Like, what's the whole point? And I said, well, I haven't thought about my underwear since I started wearing bird dogs. Like, I sit for a living, and you know how, like, you sit and you move around and, like, you do stuff, and all of a sudden you've got, like, you're wearing a man thong. Well, with these compression
really?
shorts, never happens. Never thought about it once. Don't think about these all the time. So bird dogs, if you want to use the promo code BWI, you'll get a free Hydro Flask style tumbler that you get with your purchase of your bird dog. They are super comfortable. Fitz, I've already made Fitz uncomfortable once again with the ways I've described these things. But Fitz, coming to you. How do you like your bird dogs while I take a sip out of my bird dogs Yeti tumbler?
I love them, and we got some people in chat saying you're having some audio issues. So if you didn't notice, T. Frank did say the word man thong. So now that everybody can hear that. So anyway, no, I love mine. I'm wearing mine right now. Just hopped out of the shower and threw them on. The liner is to me a game changer because it's not too tight, not too loose. I used to be a boxer guy, switched to the boxer briefs, and this is kind of right in between that sweet spot. And I don't know why I did that with my fingers, but I really like it. So yeah, we're appreciative of bird dogs and the support that they give us. I'm appreciative of bird dogs as I'm wearing them right now. So thank you for having us.
And of course, you can get the hat part of some of their merchandise over at the site as well. Use the promo code BWI to get your free gift with your first bird dogs purchase. And as we talked about, they are high quality stuff. And with being 60 degrees in November on a regular basis, you can wear them even longer now. Is my audio okay now?
They say it's everyone, so I don't know what the issue is with StreamYard. It's probably the StreamYard thing that you had the other day, so that's fun. Yeah,
so just to apologize to everybody. We go through a program called StreamYard to broadcast this to you on YouTube. Yesterday, they cut it out in the middle of our broadcast, and today we have absolutely terrible connection today. So hopefully we get through all of this. This is super fun for everybody. Let's get to the stuff, though. Let's talk about the list. The names you need to know coming up this weekend for Penn State football and who they're hosting. So Ryan, I'm coming to you off the bat. Who are the players you want to highlight first?
Yeah, like I said, 80-plus guys, so we could go all day on this one. I think there's a couple that really stand out, and I'm going to go with one guy who just confirmed today, Tariq Hayer, right outside the top 50, number 52 in the country right now, defensive back out of St. John's College High. Whether he's a safety long-term, whether he's a corner long-term, we'll see. Sean seems to think he's going to be a safety. I don't disagree. He's been a lot more safety at St. John's, compared to corner, which he was playing underclassmen. So 5'11", 175, 4-star at every site, top 100 at every site. So this is certainly a player that I think Penn State's going to be pushing hard for in the months ahead. One other two that I think fans have seen by now is Trent Wilson, defensive lineman out of Wise High School. Was originally was going to go transfer to St. Francis. I'm not exactly sure what all happened there, but he ended up at Wise this year. Didn't play the first half of the season. He has been playing out here over the last couple of weeks. And I think everybody knows he's going to be probably one of Penn State's top defensive linemen. Probably absolutely is one of Penn State's top defensive linemen in this class. 4-star at every site, number 26 in the country on 3. The industry rating, which of course, Miles, Rebels, 24/7, everybody has him at number 45 in the country. So he's absolutely one of the top guys in the Mid-Atlantic region. Somebody that I think Penn State's going to push really hard for. And, we'll see long-term who they fight it out with. I think it's pretty clear Ohio State's going to be in the mix. I expect him to take some Southern visits at some point. And hopefully you guys are hearing everything I said right now.
Yeah, as we work through this, the problem is, and not to get too far into the weeds, guys, but the way that these things are set up is that they're very easy for anyone to use, but there's also absolutely nothing I can do if there are any issues that, in terms of connection or stream like that. So hopefully it'll work itself out, but I'll be working on anything I can.
It's working perfect fine for the three of us. Right. And usually, we get that's what's weird, because I hear you guys perfectly fine, and usually it's on our end where it's staggy and everybody else says it's, whatever. So.
Fitz, interesting guys and names that you want to highlight on the list.
Well, we got to start with the official visitor this weekend, Andrew Dennis, the offensive lineman from Mount Pleasant, Michigan, former Michigan State commit. This was a guy Penn State was on before all the Michigan State stuff popped up. I guess, kind of when it did pop up, Penn State gave him a few calls. They hosted him for a visit back in the spring. Penn State actually didn't offer until the fall. So that's an interesting sort of subplot to this one, because he was interested enough to take an unofficial visit in the spring, but never actually picked up an offer from Penn State. So Penn State's board, of course, with as many guys as they have on it, pretty small. They like Dennis. Kevin Haywood is still around, in southeastern Pennsylvania, but there aren't a ton of offensive linemen out there, so they're keeping their options open, and they're interested enough to bring him in for an official visit. So he's a guy who's probably a guard. I think he's definitely a guard. There was some talk about some swing, but the more tape I watch, the more I think he's an interior player. And with what Penn State has at tackle in this class, you always want more tackles, obviously, but you have the flexibility to take another interior guy if you want to. And as we've seen this year, interior depth and offensive line depth in general, you want as many of those guys as you can get. So Penn State saw an opportunity here. They're going to bring Dennis in this weekend. I think that he's very interested. I know Clemson's in the mix. I know there's a couple other schools that have come on. He's going to take an official visit to Illinois. He's going to go to Clemson. He's going to check out some other places. I think he's going to announce at the old Army Bowl, the All-American Bowl in San Antonio. So it looks like that Penn State's right in this one, near the top, if not at the top. So, I don't think a decision is coming this weekend. I think he's going to step back and reconfigure where he's at in his recruitment. And he did so by backing off his commitment to the Spartans. So Penn State interested there in Andrew Dennis from Michigan.
Andrew has been an interesting guy all the way back to the summer, where we first, took a look into him. He has a certain profile. The power and the strength on film are clear from Andrew Dennis in terms of he's going to be a big, strong interior player. Is that part of the allure here with him? I understand best available in terms of like guys that are available right now. They always want to identify maybe an offensive lineman that slipped through the cracks, Chim Diono, Vega Ioane, but the size and the strength, it seems like Penn State has prioritized that lately. Is that fair to say that's why Andrew Dennis is one of the guys this year?
I think so. And I think there's some familiarity there that helps with that. Like, they've had him on campus. They've measured his arm length. They know basically what his build is like. So that's a lot of times when you're going out, even with Chimney and even with Venga, it was a situation where you were working with a lot of the unknowns. So you're going to have to go to people you trust for measurements. You're eventually going to have to bring those guys in on visits. So they still are a little bit more familiar with him, and they've got more tape. And it's interesting when you talk about offensive linemen and how you evaluate those guys. And the junior year is the big year, obviously, when you're talking about looking at tape. But to have the ability and the luxury, really, of being able to watch him as a senior is something that you can't really overlook there. So they've seen what he has developed into, and you don't always see that with guys that are going into their senior year. So they've seen what the next step looks like.
Yeah.
I think that's where to go. So hopefully our audio is good enough, and hopefully we've done a good job of fixing that, and hopefully a little bit more about Andrew Dennis.
Yeah, it's going to be what it's going to be at this point. So we're going to just chug along with the show. Ryan, quarterbacks. Everyone loves a quarterback conversation. So some interesting names, some big names, some rising names as well, going to be at the game this weekend. Take your pick of where you want to start on that list that we have here for the show.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is all three of what looks like Penn State's top 3 2025 quarterbacks are expected to be here. Matt Zollers, of course, we've talked about him a good bit over the last month or so. Springford, out of outside of Philadelphia, really has blown up. Penn State just offered, was it just last week? I think it was last Thursday. I think it was exactly a week ago that Penn State offered him. And he really kind of came on my radar in September, started putting on some big stats, went and watched him against Manheim Township. Very impressive arm. I would say Malik Washington. So the other two, of course, Malik Washington, Ryan Montgomery, all three of them have tweeted it out. I think if you guys pay attention to Twitter and recruiting, like I assume many of you do, you've seen that these three have all kind of put it out there publicly now. When I compare Zollers and Malik, Zollers, I think, certainly had the better junior season. Malik has some athleticism that's pretty what's the best word? Not too many guys can match that in this class. I got to watch him against Imhotep, and just the way he steps up in the pocket, able to take off, really impressed me. I mean, he has a burst that I have seen from too many quarterbacks here in recent years. And then
Great
Ryan
frame.
Montgomery is kind of the unknown right now, because that recruitment has felt like it's been up and down over the last year. There's a lot for, I don't know, what was it, a couple months. It felt like he was maybe going towards Michigan. Now Michigan, certainly seems to be all in Bryce Underwood. And then you have the fact that he's been going down south recently. Auburn, South Carolina seem to be in the mix. We'll see if any other schools. But where is Montgomery on their board? Is this truly a first come, first serve situation? Where one of them were to commit? Would Penn State consider two? Say if somebody like Matt Zollers wanted to make a move, which I don't think he's going to soon, but say he wanted to make a move in a month or two, and Malik Washington is another guy who I think's firmly been leaning towards Penn State. Would they consider taking both? That's going to certainly be a question I think we talk about more maybe as we get into 2024 a bit. But all three of these guys seem to be the three that we're focused on the most. And Sean, I'll throw it to you. Just kind of any thoughts on these three?
Would they consider taking both? I think James Franklin would do a cannonball into that pool if both of them wanted to come. It's more of a situation of, and this from following recruiting, quarterback recruiting, that doesn't happen very often. Penn State has done it. Like they did it in a special situation where Bo committed very early, and then there was the coaching change, the coordinator change, and then he found Drew Aller. So that's different. And then Michael Johnson and Taquan Roberson a couple of years ago, which was geographically that helps. Like if you took somebody from California, you took someone from, he was in Oregon, and he took someone from New Jersey. Like the impact of them overlapping is not going to come about. But Washington and Zollers, Penn State would love it, but I have a tough time seeing that one come together. It's very interesting how that one's come along. And Zollers, honestly, has been a guy that we've been talking about on Blue White Illustrated for a long time. This isn't a situation where they just got some new tape and they liked him. They had him on campus several times to throw for Mike Yurcich, Danny O'Brien. Had a great junior year. You went to one of his games where they played Manheim Township. I would say the competition's a little bit better at Spalding for Malik Washington, and that doesn't always matter. But when you're playing the secondaries that Malik Washington had to face, there's a little bit less space in there, so that'll go into it. Yeah. But both of the guys, 4 stars in the firmly in the On 300 by On 3 Sports. Both really good players, and I mean, quarterback recruiting. There's no blueprint. There's no playbook. We saw it last year. Penn State got a really, really good quarterback in the spring after the first guy that they targeted went elsewhere, and nobody's talking about the first guy anymore. And I think with good reason, because Ethan Grunkmeyer is a pretty darn good player. It's hard to say if you wanted to offer this guy first, you wanted to offer it's hard to say that the guy that you offer first is always going to be the top target. Now, the top target is Bryce Underwood. I mean, let's for sure not really silver line that one. And Penn State thinks they're in it, but they're not going to get him. I mean, that's kind of where they're at with that. So you look at the realistic guys. These guys are in there. Carter Smith from Florida is in there. Beckham Kritza, who's been all over the map, is in there as well. So they've got options. And at this point, looking back to last year, I don't think the board was as obvious, as this one is in the 2025 cycle,
or as talented. I just think that these guys. You look at Matt Zollers has great. We talk about athleticism. He's got great moves in the pocket. You mentioned maybe not the same level of competition, and some of these passes are painfully wide open. But accuracy. He's got great fundamentals from the way he delivers the football. It's very smooth, quick release. Malik Washington, athletic as well. Ryan Montgomery, built like a tank, throws like he's got a howitzer. So like the talent and the level of ability are absolutely there. And I think that Ryan, we've been talking about this. I think that Penn State's recruiting, and obviously they have to get one of these guys, but their quarterback recruiting is noticeably improving. And the guys that you're talking about and the guys that you're presenting, even if it is early on in the season and things may fall apart, but they have some pretty good options right now, it seems. Is this better than you've seen in that progress towards getting guys that are on the same level as what they've gotten recently?
For sure, but they've also done a great job scouting. I mean, Ethan Grunkmeyer, I don't know. Ethan Grunkmeyer is pretty damn good compared to these guys. So, I mean, when you look at what it was this time last year, I like these guys more than like Van Buren or Samaj Jones, for example.
And they're all, no offense to you guys, they're all tall enough. Like, I'm sure.
Why you got to bring that up?
You guys are very nice, but every quarterback in the 2024 cycle was like 6 foot.
Yeah.
And these guys aren't. Zoller's legit 6'3". Malik Washington, legit 6'4". I mean, you look down, all these guys are bigger, which kind of fits really what they do. And we mentioned the athleticism, and you take the mold of body type that Mike Yursich has liked for a long time, and that's usually not as mobile, but you mesh it with the athleticism. Zollers is, I don't want to say right up there with Malik Washington as an athlete, but like he's close. Like his numbers are strikingly close. And he can pull it down and run it if he has to. And we've seen what dynamic that brings to the Penn State offense.
Yeah, I think that's they've got a lot of guys that bring the multi-dimensional threat that I think everyone is looking for at the quarterback position in college. And they are, from what I can see, passers first too. So that's the two tenets of what Penn State's looking for. Kind of makes a complete quarterback, which is why, it's tough to find guys all the time that kind of fit all of those characteristics. Anything left on quarterbacks, or do you want to move on to the other guys you want to mention, Ryan? Some of the other guys who've tweeted that they're coming to the game.
I don't have a whole lot more on quarterbacks. I'm just very intrigued where this goes. I mean, the one thing I will say is like, okay, like what we need to figure out with Zollers is, and I need to figure this out, is like, what was Penn State to him growing up? Because like I have a pretty good feeling from talking to Malik Washington's coach that like he's not going to go far. Like, I feel like this is going to be Maryland, Penn State, maybe Vatech. But, like, when you look at where Penn State is compared to the other schools that he's consistently visiting, like, Penn State should be the clear favorite. So then if Matt Zollers, too, is, clearly leaning that way, maybe I'm a little more optimistic in the two-person class, Sean. Maybe just a little.
I mean, there's no, you can't not do it. Like if you have that opportunity, like there's certainly that in front of you. And I think they set out, we were talking about 2 quarterback class in 2024. I think they set out each class to say, hey, if 2 want to jump on board, we'll take 2. Now that's a tough sell to the families, tough sell to the coaches to, because opportunity is so crazy. And then you bring you go to the other side with the transfer portal. And that's certainly something that plays into that. But what I would say here, and you look at the 2025 quarterback rankings on On3, and Underwood and McIntyre are the top 2. I don't think there's any question that Bryce Underwood and George McIntyre are the 2 top prospects in this class in terms of quarterbacks. Alabama is very heavy into McIntyre. Alabama was also in Bryce Underwood's top 7. I think LSU probably has an edge for Bryce Underwood, although LSU and Michigan are the 2 that are always there. But Ohio State has a quarterback. Notre Dame has a quarterback commit in 25. Texas, Oregon, Colorado, which is going to be a player like Clemson. You look down the list, and all these prominent schools, not all these prominent schools, but a lot of these prominent schools who often overlap going over the same or going after the same quarterbacks have quarterback commits. That's going to help Penn State. That's going to thin out the field. And it's not a situation where they win somebody by default, but that's going to take away an option, an intriguing option, and an appealing option for Malik Washington, for Zollers, for Ryan Montgomery, something like that. So it's actually setting up really well for Penn State. Like I don't know if if we're going to be talking about this guy in a year, and in terms of like he's the real, not the real deal, but it's setting up really well for Penn State to land one of their priorities, and their priorities look ahead of where they were in 2024.
And then hold on, last thing I'll say to you, Frank, too, is their actual current roster depth there is much different than it was in previous years too, which makes 2 quarterback classes a little less appealing to Malik Washington or Zollers. So I think both these guys are very, very seriously interested. I think Ryan Montgomery is very seriously interested in Penn State, which bodes well for maybe the chances of it happening. But again, when you go back to what the quarterback depth was when they were taking Purbulla and Aller, it's quite different now.
Yeah, but to that point, I also think that it's a small thing, but James Franklin can point to, hey, look how much we've tried to get Bo Purbulla into the game, how much we have emphasized that if we take 2 quarterbacks, we're going to take it seriously, and everyone's going to get there's obviously a starter, but you're going to get an opportunity to play if you're worthy of getting on the football field in some form or fashion. Now, obviously, the dynamic of the 2 guys is different, from a stylistic standpoint and what they bring to the table. But just, you can spin any of those things the way you want to put your best case forward. Ryan, let's get to some of the other guys that you were thinking about. Oh, go ahead.
Hey, Frank, can you put John's comment up on the screen there?
Sure.
It's about quarterback recruiting, that one. Does Penn State push for a particular quarterback depending on testing, camps, and tape? I think this is an interesting look into how they do things. So Penn State was right in the mix with Hunter Johnson. This is a long time ago. I mean, class of 2017, I think it was. They were right in the mix with Hunter Johnson, but also in that top 5 tier, which we're seeing a top 5 tier with Penn State. Sean Clifford decided he wanted to go to Penn State. So do you take this guy who you think can play football at Penn State, Sean Clifford in this instance, and do you decide to brush him off, or do you decide to take him? Penn State decided to take him, and there was some blowback there because Hunter Johnson was on campus several times. Penn State really liked what they had with him, but you just don't know. So you take what you have in hand, and they took Sean Clifford, ended up being the right decision. Now, with this one, I think these guys are a little bit closer in terms of perception, because Hunter Johnson, you could play hindsight with all that all the time. You look like a good quarterback prospect at the time. But they're ready to, I think, take one of these guys. And I'm not going to say they don't care which one it is, but like these guys are in a tier where they are takes for a reason. And that's the way that they would go about it. So you might have your own little lineup in your head, but it's not like, okay, we're going to wait until one makes a decision and then we're going to move on to 2, 3, 4, etc. It's a situation where they've determined that these guys are good enough to be in their class, and they will be happy if any of these guys jump on board.
I
hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's a great point. And going back to, they all have the talent. They're all in that kind of, as you mentioned, as you said, that tier of these guys are good enough to play at Penn State and they have the skills to make things happen. Ryan, round us out here on the list.
Well, just the last thing I just want to add that there's going to be some St. Francis guys coming up, Sean. That's interesting. We'll see where things go. Obviously, St. Francis is a school Penn State, excuse me, guys, has struggled to get commitments from in the past, but they have some talented guys coming up. How do you pronounce? Is it Kevin Humes? Do you know how to pronounce his last name, Sean? Kevin.
Sure.
I mean, he's one of the top defensive backs in the country, so I think that's intriguing. Wayne Henry, 2026 guy who's also pretty high, and Jeray Edwards as well. Three notable St. Francis players coming up. I do want to mention this Darian Williams kid. There's actually a couple I want to mention. Darian Williams is interesting. Just he doesn't hold an offer from Penn State out of Gaither down in Tampa. He's coming up this weekend, but he camped really well at Penn State. And he ran some really, really nice numbers. So just somebody to maybe keep an eye on down the road. But there's just, we could go all day on some of these guys. I like this Halim Muhammad kid from Pennington. I think there's some decent film on him. And I do kind of feel like he's a guy who could blow up at some point. Penn State hasn't offered him yet. He's a 2025 defensive lineman. But this is only his second year playing football. Go ahead.
Yeah, Pennsylvania kid who's playing in New Jersey.
Yeah, he was from, I think, Willow Grove, PA is what it was. But now out at Pennington, I think he's just somebody who right now he only has like 3 offers. I think it's Maryland, Syracuse, West Virginia, something like that. The 3 local schools, I want to say. But I kind of get the vibe just from talking to some people and the way people are talking him up that he could be someone in 2-3 months now that's approaching a dozen offers or so.
We have one special entry here on the list. Will Fitopoulos. We got a kicker for Fitz. Fitz, just whatever you want to talk about with Will Fitopoulos coming to Penn State for this particular game.
I like how you put Will in quotes because his first name is also difficult to pronounce, and he goes by Will for our sake, and I appreciate that. So he came back, and this is a deep cut because if you follow Penn State recruiting closely, you probably even missed this. He was in town in late March and came, and you can't work out at these things, but he's been one of those guys that has done the kicker camp circuit, and he's done a really good job of it. And there are, opportunities out there. I'm very torn here because I'm getting the sense, and this may not just be a Penn State thing, but I'm getting the sense that the portal is where you're going to look for kickers now, because you can bring in kickers that you think are uber talented out of high school. They did it with Sanders Sahadak. They did it with Alex Paqueta. And then you're not really sure what they are until you get them here. Whereas a guy like Alex Falcons, a guy like Riley Thompson goes and does it in the college game, spends years building themselves up, getting them ready. Playing mentally in the college game is completely different. So all of a sudden you've got, I don't want to call them a ready-made entry there, but you've got the opportunity to do that. And sometimes you can get them as walk-ons, as Penn State did with Falcons. So I will be very curious, especially as a specialist guy myself, I would be very curious to see which direction college programs take in recruiting high school kickers, because sometimes they hit, a lot of times they don't. And you would like to have something that you feel pretty good about, and maybe they'll take both. Maybe they'll bring in another scholarship guy as a kicker or punter, and also go to the Ivy League, which is a really interesting scenario with every position, not just kickers, where they get 4 years, and hey, some of these guys have an extra year. So like, and they can't physically play legally. They can't physically play in the Ivy League anymore. So very interesting how this development has come along in the last couple of years. Of course, Stacey Collins, those guys that he has with him, his analysts know a lot of those guys in the kicking camp game. That's how you do a lot of your scouting as you're a special teams coordinator. You talk to the people that you trust, and you see what you can go with. So it'd be very interesting to see which direction this goes. But Will's coming up this weekend, a kicker from Florida, and a 2024. So it's an opportunity there. And a lot of these guys that are kickers, some of them have to start as walk-ons. So is he a scholarship caliber guy? I don't know. But that's it's just an interesting one, because any 2024 that visits right now that you could see at least on the periphery of a scholarship realm is an interesting visitor.
I got one more guy, T. Frank. Can I get one more guy in real quick?
Yeah, of
Sean,
course.
we should mention Elijah Melendez too. You know, he put it out there that he's coming out. Yeah, right now he's ranked 49th in the country. Linebacker prospect out of Kissimmee, Florida. J1 Snyder stopped by his school during the bye week. That was one of their stops. I believe it was on Thursday or Friday. He goes to the Ohio State game a couple weeks ago. Excuse me. Sean and I both seem to have
kids.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. Yeah, you both have kids.
And but also he traveled up for the Ohio State game. Did watch Penn State. He watched their defense perform pretty well against the Buckeyes. But what was interesting is he stopped at State College before going home. Sean and I didn't really even know much about it. Usually we have somewhat of a sense on who's going to stop up and when, but that was a kind of a little bit of a surprise visit. And then here we are, 3 weeks later or so, and he's coming back to State College to see this game this week. So really good looking linebacker.
I think he also put out a top 10 between Columbus and State College without Penn State in it. Then he visited Penn State, and now he's back to Penn State. So
that's right.
Hey man, 2025 Florida recruiting, we're all in it. We had to cover the kicker first, and then we got to the top 50 kid coming up.
Yeah.
We have our priorities and standards, Fitz. That's for sure.
But yeah, he's got a stacked offer list though. I mean, like I said, we already mentioned Ohio State. He's got Georgia, Bama, all types of really good schools. So Penn State obviously always does pretty well at linebacker, and J1 does a great job in Florida. So we'll see where this goes. But just interesting to me that he's coming back up here 3 weeks later. After stopping by on a Sunday, meeting with the staff. Wants to see a game in Beaver Stadium. He's going to see a game this weekend.
That's for sure. And that leads us into our next conversation, which is about Penn State practice, which we saw yesterday. Thursday, we always give you the lowdown on what was going on. Some of the context, I should say. The full stuff you want to know about, the full availability report, etc., BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Not only do you get it there first, but you get the complete context, which is a great reason to sign up with our big game special, 50% off your first year for new subscribers. So, Fitz, you and I were there last night at practice. What was your observation over on the defense?
Chop was back. That is good. I don't want to get too into the weeds there, but no, he was back at practice. James Franklin said he's been back with them all week. Of course, he went down to Maryland, warmed up, which I think is a big step. It was probably overlooked, but that's a big step in getting him back. As far as where he's at on a percentage scale, I don't do percentages anyway, but it's impossible to say. Hesitate to call him a full participant last night, just because they're going to be watching him like a hawk all week long, just to make sure that the right things are happening and he's doing the right things and getting himself where he needs to be for Saturday physically, but also mentally, and also from a health perspective. So, but the important thing that he was out there, Amin Vanover was out there. They had 5 defensive ends going through their rotation, which means Nittany Lions, I assume, was bumped back down to the D squad there. But if that maybe you want to read between the lines there, they're going to go in with 5 and be ready with 5. That tells you that they think they're going to be ready with Chop, and they're going to be ready with Amin. So I'm a lot of the way there, but given how Penn State has handled injuries in the past, it's never a final thing, and that's the doctor's call.
Yeah, it's always a hard thing to say, because we saw JB Nelson in a similar situation where he was a full participant going through contact, which I think is really important when we signify these things, because early in the year, Trey Wallace was going through practice, never took any sort of contact, and then was always a mystery at game day. And then, of course, JB Nelson didn't play in the game we expected him to. But as you said, all signs are positive. With the passing game, once again, focus on the offense focuses on the passing game. And that's what we get to see, the exact same positional drills, the exact same part of practice each week. So things haven't necessarily changed. All of the details and things like that will keep over at the site. But a couple of things I did notice: route detail, depth, timing, high pointing the football, all of the things about the receiver position that James Franklin has mentioned of the details of the game, they're harping on it. So the question of, what is the staff doing? Why aren't they doing X, Y, and Z? They're doing everything they possibly can to get these guys to understand the details of the position and to get the passing game to click, which is going to be very important this weekend to play complementary football and not have one part of your game or the other shut down. Offensive line, spent a little bit of time with them. A lot of guys from the D squad were getting work when we were there, so a little bit less than we normally get to see, but typical stuff they've been working there. The offense really kind of same as usual fits with what we see week to week. James Franklin's press conference. Ryan, I don't know if you had a chance to catch any of it, but there's some interesting things that we can talk about now here on the show. And by the way, if you're here in the chat, we're going to have a mini mailbag here at the end if there are any good questions and that you want to throw up here into the chat. We'll have that after we're done talking about practice and James Franklin. So throw those in right now. We'll get to any if we have any at the end of the show. But Fitz, James Franklin talked about a number of topics yesterday. Chop was one of those things. His health, the offensive passing game, their cohesion. What stood out to you of interesting things that were discussed after practice on Wednesday?
For me, since this is a recruiting show, James Franklin not going on the road this weekend is interesting. And it's a noon kick. Sometimes when they have noon kicks and they have to get things accomplished, they don't go out. But that's notable to me. And I know people have complained about it. It's not something that changes how things go on Saturdays. Like, even though people want to put that in their heads that it is, but like, that's more time spent focusing on Michigan. It's more time spent focusing on the meetings that they have to go through. So any distraction that you can take out. Of course, they have an official visitor coming in, which is, a little bit of a distraction itself, but any sort of small distraction they can get out. I think that it tells you where their mindset is for this game.
The thing that I thought was interesting coming off of that is always the conversation around how prepared is Penn State for big games. Bye week was a conversation earlier this year, but the part about the third quarter, James Franklin asked about that, about his team's dominance in the third quarter. And then immediately before the question was even finished, he said, yeah, and theirs is too. How much do you think that that's going to be a determining factor in this game of who wins that third quarter, given that both teams have been so dominant? Penn State, I don't believe, is allowed a point in the third quarter this year.
Neither team has allowed a point in the third quarter this year. It's pretty remarkable. And it's sort of a testament to both staffs, especially on the defensive side of the ball, the adjustments that they make, the way that they play. Like, I would venture to guess that the third quarter has been the quickest quarter for both of these teams to, do what they do on offense, to run the football and be a little bit more successful there, and then stop what opposing teams are doing. And I mean, let's be honest, they've kind of manhandled everyone in the third quarter anyway, like Michigan has. They've done that throughout the game. So I don't know. Is it probably a storyline we talk too much about? Yeah, but there's some credence in there to what both teams do and the way that both teams react and respond. And it's one of those reasons, like it was the Iowa game. We were talking about that it was a 10-0 game at halftime or something like that. And I looked to the left, and Greg's like, they got this. The points are coming. They got this. And I agreed with him. He said it first, so I'll give him credit. But I agreed with him. And then all of a sudden, 31-0 is what you've got. So Penn State, a very good job doing that. But also Michigan does the same thing. So I think that that's probably a storyline that's, a big picture thing, more so than what we're going to see on Saturday. But at the same time, like, hey, if you can get out of if you can get out of Dodge with 0 points and get into the fourth quarter, I mean, that's certainly a good thing for Penn. That would be a good thing for Penn State,
for sure. Yeah, Ryan. Final thoughts here as we get to the end of the show. What are you looking forward to over the next 2 days heading into the game, or what maybe is something that people can go check out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com that you're going to be writing in the next couple of days?
We talk about the third quarter, but this game, the last 2 years, has kind of come down to the fourth quarter. I guess you could say last year's game was the third quarter. They had those two long runs late in the third, but obviously last time at Beaver Stadium, it was fourth quarter. And look, the whole big thing with Michigan, right, is wearing teams down. Oh, just hit my camera there. I'm getting all out of whack here. Anyway, but I think there's some legitimacy to that.
Ryan's ready to run through a wall and smash his camera in the process.
Let's go. But Michigan's a very physical team. Penn State is a very physical team, but they haven't been on Michigan's level the last couple of years. So yeah, third quarter is going to be massive for sure, no doubt. But fourth quarter, in a lot of ways, is that's where we're really going to know is Penn State's defensive line better or not. I feel like that fourth quarter we're going to know, and probably in the third too. But as far as this weekend, well, I am the only one here who predicted Penn State to win. So thank you. I'm sure everybody in the chat is happy with me right now. But now I'd say go check out predictions. We got a ton of stuff coming up. Obviously, I'll keep updating the visitor lists. As Sean already said, we've got a handful of messages out to guys that we're hoping to get confirmations from. But, the one thing I would say is when I look back at Ohio State and everybody was picking Penn State to win that game, and then I look at this game, I think that Ohio State game was way more easier to predict. And I'm still the dumb ass, I'll say, that still predicted Penn State to go to Ohio State and beat them on the road, right? And
you changed it.
Obviously looking back.
Just so people know, you did change it at the last minute.
I originally was picking Ohio State, and if you actually, we have a newsletter for our magazine, and if you read my prediction in the magazine newsletter, I picked Ohio State, and then at the end, when I saw the whole beat picking Penn State, I was like, oh, I can't be the one guy who's picking Ohio State. Of course, Greg was. I left Greg on an island. Yeah. I left Greg on an island, but I think when I look back at that, like that game was way more easier to predict than this one. I do genuinely believe Penn State can. I don't want to say I do think they can kind of win, man. I do. So we'll see if it can happen. It's all about, to me, in the trenches, defensive line. Are they more physical? Do they have the depth? And we'll see. But I think Penn State's D-line's a little bit better, and I think Michigan's O-line and their overall physicality and run game has kind of regressed a little bit. So I don't think they're running for 418 yards. I'll put it that way.
Fitz, I'm going to give you a quick second to clear your throat and then give me your final thoughts on what's going on with you heading into the game.
Thanks, man. Struggling getting to the finish line. Coming to the game, I'm going to do an SON for tomorrow, talk about visitors, talk about the what we're hearing on Penn State's recruiting in 2024 to 25. So look forward to that. That's always a popular segment on the site. But yeah, I mean, I'm just looking forward to this game. Like I'm very intrigued because I don't know what's going to happen. Through the first 6 games, Penn State looked like they looked, but we also kind of had it in the back of our minds that wasn't the team that was going to play Ohio State. That wasn't the team that was going to have to play Michigan. And when they got to Ohio State, they were shell-shocked. They had to step up their competition level immensely from what they saw in the first 6 games of the season. Michigan has sort of had a similar build-up to this, and now they've looked great doing it. They've dominated teams. They've run guys off the field. But at the same time, that's a different entity going against them than going against Nebraska and going against the other teams that they have beaten. So I'm curious to see how Michigan makes that step, if it takes them some time to get into it or something like that, because it's a great team and it's a balanced team, and that's what makes them dangerous, is they can hurt you in multiple ways. But I'd be very interested to see how Michigan takes that step up and sort of has to get up to speed very quickly. So because we really haven't seen it this year. People keep saying that, you can just wash out Michigan's first 8 or 9 games, for 9 games. But you can't really do that. But at the same time, you kind of got to have that in the back of your head. Like, how good is this team? And we're going to have to find out on Saturday.
So I know Penn State fans don't like, generally, this is a general statement from what I've seen from the internet, that Penn State fans don't like the Penn State offensive line. This is the best offensive line Michigan has faced all year. I went back and I watched the film. I was really depressing watching some of these offensive lines try to contend with Michigan. And Michigan can be overwhelming because they're fast, they're violent, they're physical. And I just, like, the first time you put them on tape, it's like, wow, look at this defense. But the longer you watch, you can start to find some of the areas where Penn State might match up better than you would expect. And that's why I hate on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And it's like, hey, give us your prediction. And I'm like, here's some numbers that we can throw on a paper. But what we have coming up here on the BWI Live Show is tomorrow, Clayton Safey of the Wolverine, who is our sister site in the On3 network. He's going to be joining us for our 5 things on Friday. So join us for that. We'll get the Michigan perspective right before the game. I'll give you what I think is going to be part of the conversation about how Penn State matches up. But Ryan, as you said, I guess the way I'd phrase it is, Michigan has more paths to victory. You talk about the balance here than Penn State. Right now, that offense, the way they present themselves as balanced, run, pass, both are options for them to get explosive plays. Penn State has to prove in the biggest game so far that they do have that balance they've been talking about all year long. Excited to find out how all of that plays out. Guys, thank you so much. Ryan Snyder, Sean Fitz here on the BWI Live Show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. We will be back with more, like we said, coming up tomorrow, 10 a.m. Hope the internet is fine enough that we can actually get the show on the air. We'll talk to you then.